Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 film, The Animal Kingdom. Now, I do have to tell you, it's actually a 2023 film in the country it was originally released in, which is France. So yes, this is a French film. But here's the interesting thing. I went to find this film to watch because I knew it was being released in the US digitally. And I usually just go through Vudu, which is spelled V-U-D-U. It's owned by Fandango, if people don't know. I wanted to do the rental there, which is where I do a lot of my rentals. And they have an English language version, and that's it. So I would have done the subtitled French version, but all they had on there was the English dubbed version, which the English dubs don't do anything good for the film. They actually take a lot of the emotion that was originally done by the original actors out of the film, unfortunately. So when I was watching it, I was trying as hard as I could to really look at the physical acting and the facial expressions and the mouth movements of the actual actors to figure out how it looked like they were doing in their native tongue performance. So I will say off the bat, I think the acting is very good for that. Now, that said, if you end up watching the English dubbed version, it's a little weird, but I'm very used to watching a lot of old Italian horror that was dubbed in English, so I'm kind of at home with it, honestly. Anyway, this film was directed by Thomas Cailley, who did Love at First Fight and Ad Vitam. Written by Cailley and Pauline Munier. Again, it's a French film. It was $7.41 to rent on Vudu, and that's after tax and everything. So pretty cheap. Definitely worth watching. This is a very interesting film. It's light on the horror. It's kind of like this very light, slow, horror-ish, sci-fi-ish film. It's probably more on the sci-fi side than horror, but there is definitely a horror element to it. So just know going into it, it's very slow. It's one of those very slow-moving, emotional, kind of atmospheric type film that really just wants to immerse you in the world that they're creating fully before they really give you much of any story. Now, in my opinion, that kind of works a little bit to its detriment, but still quite a good movie. I do recommend checking it out. But anyway, quick synopsis. This is set in a world in which something happens where people start turning into animal-human hybrids. Not everyone. Some people. So it becomes a situation of, how are those people dealt with because they're viewed as starting to become very feral because they're not used to this, turning into an animal, basically. This is all very brand new. There's not a whole lot of research there or anything, so that society, normal society, human society kind of takes the stance of, we don't know what this situation is. Are these people dangerous? What's going on? So you end up with a lot of prejudice. You end up with a lot of confusion. You end up with a lot of fear. But you end up with some of the other stuff. You also have characters who are very much like, they were people and they still are people to some degree. So it's a very interesting concept, and that's all I'm going to say synopsis-wise. But it was definitely worth doing, very interesting. Unfortunately, I do feel like the film is very predictable with what it's doing. Now, that said, if you don't mind kind of knowing where it's going before it gets there, it's done pretty well. And it looks really good. It's directed very well. It's acted very well. Cinematography looks nice. It's got a great mood and atmosphere to the film itself. But it's slow. It's one of those things. And I know there are people out there who are, I'm looking at you, Entropy Stings. There are people out there who are like, I like a very slow moving kind of live in this world type film. And this is that film for sure. It's also a bit of a coming of age film, which I'm a fan of. I do like those types of films. They speak to me. I guess they speak to the kid in me. I don't know. I think maybe it's because when I was young, I watched a good amount of those types of films. So I don't know. I like it. So they pretty quickly established the dynamics of the relationship between the father and son, who are the main characters in this film. It's mainly about a father and son who are kind of trying to navigate through this world. And I should have said this before with the synopsis, the mother, the kid's mother and father's wife, had changed. So it's them trying to kind of deal with that situation, but also trying to deal with just being in this world. And there are some other things that transpire, obviously, but they do a great job of setting up how their relationship is, how it's not so straightforward. Much like real kids with their parents, it's a complicated relationship, and they establish that very, very quickly in the film. very effectively, I will say. You're hit very fast with some interesting events that make you wonder what's up. They let you know immediately what's going on here. There are these human-animal hybrids in the world, or I should say people who are turning part animal. They're in the world. You know that, like, right off the bat. You see it. It's very in your face. The camera work is inappropriately shaky, unfortunately. That's something I really didn't understand. I said the cinematography was good for the most part, but I have a problem with using handheld camera work when you don't need it, like shots where people are just kind of sitting and they're stationary, they're not moving or anything. There's no action going on, there's nothing intense happening, and using handheld camera work because it is overly shaky and can be, and that's not the time for it. When it's calm, that's not the time for it. And a lot of this film is calm. You know, it's a slow-moving, slow-plotting, like, calm film for the most part. There are some more intense moments, but there should have been a lot more smooth, stable camera work. Use tripods, they exist for a reason. So that was one of my big issues. You have a mix of how people view and refer to the people who have partially turned animal, which I think, you know, mirrors what society would be. Basically, you're always going to have people who are polarized over this stuff, people who are immediately afraid, and people who are immediately like, you know, these were people, like, I see the humanity in them still. So you get both of those views. There's a wrinkle that gets thrown in pretty early that makes you believe heartache may be coming at some point in this film. It is a slow, like I said, emotional film. So there is a heartache aspect to it in certain ways. It's not just one thing. It's a few things. I didn't think they went too hard on it though. Like, I didn't find myself getting too down in the dumps, because there certainly are those emotional films where I'm done with watching the film and I'm just like, I feel depressed now. This was not one of those films. I still felt okay at the end, so it doesn't go too hard on that stuff. I will say the CGI is pretty good, and you see a lot of very interesting human-animal hybrid concepts come to life here. And it's not just with CGI, because they do some of it in practical effects, and both of those things look really good. They look like they match up very well. They're integrated very well with each other, and that was one of my favorite things about the film, is seeing what concepts they came up with, you know, this person mixed with this type of animal and this type of animal. Some of them look a lot cooler than others, but they're all interesting to some degree or another. They do seem to force some character relationships too quickly, which is a weird thing because it's a bit over 2 hours. It's like 2 hours and 7 minutes with credits. And with it being that long, I would think there's no way they just are going to, like, force people together like they end up doing with some of these characters. It's not everyone, but there are certain characters where they're just like, they just meet and then automatically, like, they're so drawn to each other, and they have this, like, relationship that would have been forged otherwise over, you know, months or years or whatever, and it just feels too forced. So some of the writing is problematic in that situation, but there's not too much of that. It is forgivable, in my opinion. It is pretty slow. I cannot stress this enough. It is pretty slow. You have to be okay with that. Given the nature of the film and the fact that you kind of, you know, are wondering what you're going to see next to a certain degree, and the mood of it, I think it still kept me engaged for those reasons. Also, the ending is pretty good. You know, while I was watching, I'm like, you know, this is slower. I need to have some sort of payoff at the end. I think it's a pretty good payoff at the end. I really did enjoy that. Yeah. So I think for the most part, if you end up liking this movie going up to the end of the film, you're probably going to like how they end the film. But, you know, there'll always be people that's not the case. It is an overall good film, but it is predictable. That's one of my other big issues, is I felt like every time something was about to happen or something was going to come up in the next 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, it was so simple to understand, oh, I feel like they're setting this up. And then that's exactly what would happen. So I like a little more surprise to it. It makes a film feel a little more unique, but the overall concept is pretty unique in that sense. It does need to be tightened up, I will say. 2 hours and 7 minutes is way too long for this film. They really should have cut it down. I think they should have cut down probably about a half an hour, honestly, and it could honestly really benefit from that. There is a lot of stuff that kind of felt like you didn't necessarily need it. There were characters I felt like you didn't even need at all. So, yeah, they just needed to, take another pass at the script, edit it down some, because over 2 hours for a film like this is too long, in my opinion. The pacing is not the greatest. So I do want to say something thematically at the very end, but I'll give my rating first, and then if people don't want to know the thematic stuff about it, because that can be kind of spoilery, if people don't want to know the themes going into the film, you can, log off at that point. But out of 5 stars, half stars in play, I'm going to give it a 3.5-star rating. I was between 3 and 3.5, but I think it's just enough with the original concept and how the mood of the film is and the really good acting. I think it gets there. So I'm going 3.5, but I was between 3 and 3.5. So it is good. I do recommend it. It's a nice French film, but yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the theme. The theme of it is, or what I picked up in this, the film comments on how humans easily see anyone or anything different and immediately think that is an adversary to humanity. I think it's, that societal commentary on, someone who looks different from you shows up and immediately you feel like, I don't know if I can trust this person. It's marking people and things as other, which is historically a problem with societies where, you don't understand how a person lives or why they do what they do or the beliefs that they have or their values or their morals or their ethics. And so immediately you view them as like they're something else. They're not human to me. They're not my type of person. They pose some sort of danger to me in one way or another. And I think that's the kind of commentary they're really going for here. It does work. It doesn't work like super, super strongly, but it works. And it's a pretty good film, like I said. So 3.5 stars on this one. If you've seen this film and you want to talk about it, we can do spoilers in the comments. Go ahead and put a comment down there, whether you liked it, you hated it, or you're in between on it. We'd be down to talk some more about it. Do me a favor and hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would greatly appreciate that. It really does keep me kind of motivated to keep doing these. Also, hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos. And help me out also by doing the thumbs up on any video you end up watching because that helps with, the YouTube algorithm. But regardless, I always do appreciate people taking their time to actually watch me. It still blows my mind that people do that because I just view myself as like just some dude on the internet. But anyway, thank you so much for your time. And until next time, keep it brutal.